So Tonia, you were telling me about that time when your brother, when he was finally able to get, or that he was able to receive the bone marrow transplant, but he was not physically able to accept it. So he finally gets it, but he can't accept it. And ultimately, that was sort of the turning point in his life.
Yeah, his body was failing. Everything was starting to fail, and he had an episode that put him into the ICU, and basically after that, he wasn't able to speak. His eyes were open. He could look at us. He could make eye contact. He could have very, very small body movements, but he couldn't speak. And oh gosh, I don't know the exact time frame, but I'm going to say it seemed like a lifetime. It was probably only 3 weeks before he passed away that happened. But for those 2 or 3 weeks, all we had were his eyes, and he couldn't speak. And so he was alive and he's awake, and that was really difficult. Was
he able to still process and understand?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
oh,
very
wow.
much so.
Wow.
So, and even at this point, you still think that he's going to get through it. You can do this, Scott. Yeah. And I would go and say that, and he can't talk to me. And I would sit there, and sometimes I just have to stop talking and just make eye contact and almost say, hey, you know what I'm saying, I know what you're saying. And there was a point where I saw that he knew that he was going to die, and he actually, much earlier on, even before that episode happened, he was actually, he could accept death. He got to a point where he could accept death. And part of that was he had formed a great relationship with a chaplain at Children's Hospital that was very focused on Buddhism and a lot of Buddhist practices, which really enlightened Scott to his life and also the possibility of death. And so he actually was a lot stronger than the rest of the family going into that most difficult time. And he was okay with it. And I saw that, my parents saw that, but we didn't accept it.
Yeah. And real quick, is it just your brother and yourself?
Yeah.
Was okay. And there was a bit of an age difference, so you were definitely the big sister and he was your little brother.
Yeah.
When did you realize that you were going to have to let him go?
Oh gosh, not until after when he went into ICU, and it was probably about a week after that I almost could feel like he was almost sending me messages. It's amazing how powerful eyes and the mind can work. He didn't have to say a word. I knew what he was telling me. He was ready to die, and I hate to say that, but I know I could see that. I knew that he was accepting. He had peace about it, and he wanted to make sure that we had peace about it, and we didn't, especially that time. And I didn't accept it until I saw it in the doctor's eyes, and they had to say, you need to prepare yourself for this.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, I feel like we probably struggled more than him at the end. I think that he really accepted it, and he was more worried about us. And that was, of course, so difficult because he couldn't talk, he couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
But there were times where once I realized what was going to happen and I accepted it, all of a sudden we both could kind of let go, and I could, grab his hand and hold on to him and just say, it's going to be okay, and don't worry about us, and just kind of, share what we had at the moment. And I wish I had more of that. I wish I could just sit there in silence with him for months and months. Yeah. But life throws you curveballs, and you just have to roll with it. So.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's got to be tough. You've had some time between now and when that happened, but I'm sure it's still got to hurt a lot. So it's kind of tough to hear.
Yeah, I don't actually talk about it in such detail. So.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing it, because it is important, and it has inspired you to move on and do some very neat, big stuff. And I want to talk about that. So tell me about what came into your mind that made you go, I'm going to do kiteboarding for cancer, KBF or KB, the number 4C.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was in the middle of his treatment, literally very middle, when he was still getting his treatment, about 4 months in. And at that point, I had no idea what was going to happen 8 months from then. But I thought, I can't really do anything. When I go up and see him on the weekends, there's really not much I could do. I just sit there. I would talk to him. I would, we would talk about things he wants to do or share stories about his friends, what have you. But really, there was nothing I can do. And so I really needed something to do. And anyone that has gone through this with a friend or a family member can relate and understand that you can't do anything. So I took what I knew, which was kiteboarding. At that point, I was teaching, and I also had a lot of contacts in the industry because I'd worked for one of the kiteboarding companies, and also had a lot of friends in the kiteboarding world that I knew that would be passionate and supportive of doing something like this. So I just used what I knew, and I thought, there's nothing like this in kiteboarding. There's no cause-related event, and we can make it simple. We'll just throw it out there. Hopefully the community will be into it, and see how it goes. And so we did. It kind of happened over a layover in Houston when my good friend Garrett Zallen, who's a pediatric surgeon actually at Dornbecker Children's Hospital, and my husband, Greg, who's now my husband, he wasn't then, we were sitting there in like a Chili's in the airport or something, and said, hey, we should really do something like this. And it was a 5-hour layover and over napkins and just throwing ideas out on the table. And
really?
that was in April of 2007. So that was really close to when he passed away. And at that point, I still had hope. I still thought that he was going to make it through. So we came back to Hood River and just jumped on it. We just reached out to people. We posted things online, on Facebook, on forums, and just word of mouth. Say, here's what we're doing, here's why. Each of us have been touched by cancer. Most people have somehow. And we were overwhelmed by the community support, especially the kiteboarding community. They came in and just with just all their energy just poured into the first event, and have ever since.
Yeah. Well, when we come back, we'll talk about how it's kind of exploded and really gotten a lot bigger than sounds like you even imagined. So that's great. So we'll talk about that when we come back. We'll be right back.
Next,
he created these amazing pieces of art, and we ended up auctioning them off, and ever since, the live auction and art has been a big component to the Kiteboarding for Cancer event.